You know what, guys? Let's get to Joshua in like 15 minutes. I want to do let's go over this review
Yeah, I got it.
of my book real quick because I honestly should talk about it more. Feels really weird to like promote a book now, but I am happy with the book. Against the Web: Cosmopolitan Answer to the New Right. And my buddy Mac McInnes, actually, I mean, honestly, I mean, I'm getting to know him better now, but I shouldn't say like he's not like a buddy, right? So I mean, we're on friendly terms, but we're not like so friendly that he couldn't have slagged this if he wanted to. So this is like a real positive review he wrote for Marion West. And this book, again, I just want to say for people who are thinking about it, like, yes, it does have an in-depth critique of Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris. And my argument is that these people, even if they as individuals become less relevant, the types of arguments they're making are going to be the template for different types of neoliberal or right-wing arguments or quote unquote centrist arguments for quite some time. And I use the imagery of Hungary Station, Finland Station, and Singapore Station, which I got from Bhaskar Sunkara, to basically describe three world scenarios. And Hungary is the neo-authoritarian one, Viktor Orban, who I would like everybody to look up the meeting between Jordan Peterson and Viktor Orban from last year, because we all know that, freedom comes from, yeah.
Yeah, funny how neither of the Weinsteins have followed up on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, very interesting. It's just worth looking at, especially in light of the official ending of democracy in Hungary over the last couple of days. And again, as somebody who's really, I'm not going to get into too much of a tangent, but I'm like totally done with and highly allergic to, maudlin sort of dramatic liberal and left language at a certain point. Like I'm actually very much of the let's be precise school. Hungary has ended democracy. It's not a tendency towards it. It's not a corroded democracy. They've done it like in a formal liberal sense. They're not doing democracy right now. And Jordan Peterson hung out with this guy last year.
Do you remember what Jordan Peterson was quoted in the Hungarian press as saying about democracy and who is compatible with it?
I do not.
He said Muslims weren't compatible to democracy when he was on that trip, and people were saying, "Well, including Weinstein, is like, well, these two things look bad." He's going to meet Orban, and he's saying this to the press. Maybe he didn't actually say this, and we've never heard any follow up. But he certainly hasn't disavowed that headline. So
right, I mean, we haven't, and maybe he will when he comes back out. Well, who knows? But it's also, you should probably read up on what the Hungarian immigration and Muslim policies are generally. But then Singapore represents, let's just say, like technocratic capitalism. It's sort of the dream of the Mike Bloomberg Davos world, and it's best represented in Singapore. And of course, these worlds are closer than we know. Like Orban actually praises some of the Asian governance models that he considers to be, influences on him. And then Finland Station is Lenin going back to this before the 1917 revolution and stripping everything else aside. It represents an impulse for human democratization. And I think the IDW is actually kind of handy because they embody a lot of Singapore and a lot of Hungary arguments. And so here's maybe just scroll up to the above graph. Brooks devotes, I'll quote now from him, Brooks devotes a chapter apiece to criticizing the main intellectuals of the IDW, starting with Sam Harris, moving to Jordan Peterson, and concluding with Ben Shapiro. Each figure gets treated seriously as Brooks reads through their major works and points out where they make serious errors or engage in reckless, dangerous polemicism under the guise of being, quote unquote, more reasonable. And then it goes on to say, like, Brooks notes that each of the thinkers in the IDW falls in the trap of trying to explain away injustices through naturalizing or mythologizing them, as Brooks puts it in the first chapter. And then there's a quote from me. So that is a major part of the work. And then can we just scroll to the bottom? I won't spend too much more time on this. I really appreciate this review. Yeah, just the last graph. Okay. Right here. Up a little bit more. Sorry. The last part, and this is really what excites me, because this kind of cosmopolitan, socialist, universalist message which really does reject identitarian politics and bifurcation, but also recognizes that global values need to be grounded and expressed globally. I think as I wrote this, I realized in some ways this is kind of like the mission of this show in some respects. The last part of Brooks's book is the most interesting, but sadly the least likely to be discussed. Let's make sure that that's not the case. Let's make this most discussed. Drawing on Mark Fisher's seminal essay, Exiting the Vampire Castle, Brooks acknowledges that many leftists have alienated people through tactics of shaming and ostracization. Rather than trying to win converts, many on the left have taken to condemning anyone who disagrees with them in the strongest possible terms while refusing to countenance any moral failings in the past. Brooks rightly argues that this is a seriously bad decision, and he argues that a rejuvenated left should be dedicated itself to cosmopolitan socialism, a la Cornel West, Amartya Sen, C.L.R. James. Each of these figures rightly criticized Orientalist and racist narratives, suggesting that only European cultures produced anything of great or lasting value, but they also happily acknowledge the genius of Shakespeare, Enlightenment philosophy, and so on. And then you can just scroll down a bit. I'll just do this last quote, but I go into this much more in the book, obviously. Much of the ancient Western tradition is, in fact, highly geographically and intellectually diverse and included African and Pan-Asian sources that are misleadingly remembered and misleadingly whitened as merely Greek or Roman. But to underline a larger point I'm trying to make, instead of policing each other's influences and enjoyment for evidence of cultural appropriation, we should all strive to emulate the curiosity and rigor of the great Christian revolutionary intellectual Cornel West, who explores the echoes between Anton Chekhov and blues with no interest in drawing artificial lines between cultures. This argument's very inspiring, and I myself have called for a more engaged and curious lefts, and so on. So anyways, that's a great review. Look at the conversation I did on Zero Books with Doug Lane. It gets much more into this, and it's available on pre-order, and I go buy it at Red Emma's so we can support our great, tremendous independent booksellers who do, I mean, they really do such a tremendous job. You can also buy it directly at John Hunt Publishing, and certainly for at least this week, we need to be #boycott Amazon. I would say longer, but we really need to have solidarity with those Whole Foods workers striking. Could not be more important. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts, guys? Did you actually? I know Griscom. I know you read the review. What do you guys got? Any thoughts on this?
I was just saying to Matt in the break, one, I really appreciate hitting back on this kind of silly postmodern caricature that Jordan Peterson and all these people push. That's in the review. But I think that last point, I really hope that people engage with that argument more and more. Or the last chapter, it reminds me a lot about like Fanon, why Fanon was such a radical thinker too, because he really was able to, he didn't draw those false divisions. He recognized the falsity of like the European ideal in its practice. His lines like Europe talks about men and kills them everywhere they find them. But he didn't go into some kind of thing. It's like, oh, we're not going to read, Plato or participate in that project. So I think that's definitely something that's very important. And I hope that people are able to take away from that, not, and just like really engage with that instead of just looking for, dunking on these guys, which we should do a lot of, but we should also be building as much as possible.
And I will also say, like, there is some, just to be, clear, there is some dunking in the book. There is some comedy, but like, it's, especially in the edit process, I made it less and less like, I mean, look, obviously what I think of these guys comes across, but like, here's the thing. And McManus is right. He says like the Peterson and Harris chapters are really serious. So like Harris to me is a very slippery thinker. And so I really actually spent a lot of time, maybe at some level, it's just my own like satisfaction, really trying to like take care of a bunch of arguments that have driven me crazy. Mm-hmm. Ever since I've heard Harris, right? And then in Peterson's case, I think at the end of the day, a lot of his ideas are actually fairly less interesting or less kind of difficult to deal with, in my opinion. But I actually think the alienation that he's speaking to and the self-help stuff is actually really important and speaks to very serious things that are happening in our society right now. So that chapter is very much looking at like the conditions around Peterson. And again, saying like the left just dismissing either self-help or questions of personal meaning, or just, saying like, oh, you're a young white man, you have nothing to complain about. These are all like fool's errands and totally insufficient to the task. So we actually need to build compelling answers around it. Probably the Shapiro chapter is the most like, let's just talk about the Andrew Young interview. I'll cop to that. There's some truth to that. Although building a whole, argument on like Rome, on Athens and Jerusalem and like this unique Western history, and then just like, even besides all of the like geographic and historical problems with that, to just say like, yeah, just somehow Islam just isn't a part of that. Like this major monotheistic teaching, like tradition, like totally intensely entwined with the Greeks. Yeah, no, just not. Yeah. Not doing that one.
They didn't. I mean, the Greeks weren't even considered to be, properly European for a long time.
Right, exactly.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.